Hi and welcome to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashley King, and I will bring you a wealth of interesting people with fascinating ideas across the tech industries, the creative industries, and also uplifting stories of courage and hope. We all go through prickly situations in life. I believe that through courage, creativity, and curiosity, you can find inspiration to nurture your zest. That thing that gets you up and out of bed every morning, the thing that lifts you up and lights up your day. So join me in the studio and let's see who we have in the hot seat today. Hello and welcome to Nurture Your Zest. Today I'm joined by Sarah Jane, and if you are anywhere in the Northeast, you will have seen her networking everywhere. She is so fun and positive, and she runs a business practically positive in every way. This is someone that really lights up my life, so I'm really happy to light up your screens or your ears with some positivity today. So welcome, Sarah. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you. I am super excited to be here. I feel like I've been before because I've seen it, but it's really exciting to be here in person.
Yeah, and I know we've chatted over the years at different times, and the podcast has sort of grown since we first chatted. So it's the perfect time to have you on the show.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. For sure.
So you have quite a varied skill set and career. I know we were chatting before and you were mentioning you've built a successful nail salon. You are a coach. You help people with their business coaching. You help people smash a lot of limiting beliefs. You do an amazing arrow breaking ceremony, which we will talk about and maybe even do some footage of if we have time. But what would you say if you were going to express yourself or introduce yourself? How do you describe Sarah?
So I often call myself the modern day Mary Poppins, not because I'm going to come and clean your nursery or take the children to the park, but because she comes in, she shows the family actually just what they're capable of. She shows them the magic they have inside of them, and then she sets them off and off she goes to help the next family. And I see myself as doing that. I come in, I help people unlock their confidence, their inner strength, because we all have much more inside of us than we realise, and actually we need the tools and we need the encouragement and the support to be able to unlock that, to fulfil our potentials.
That is such a beautiful mission, and I can really hear when you're talking about it how invested you are in that journey and how much it means to you to go and unlock people where they're at. So why do you think in your own knowledge or the families you work with or the people, why do you think people get stuck?
So I always take it back to sort of childhood. If you go into any school and speak to a 6 or 7-year-old, they want to be an astronaut, they want to be a vet, they want to be all sorts of these, amazing careers. And they have absolutely no doubt. My little one is 8 and has just started playing football. And the other day he was like, if I got taken by like Madrid or Paris Saint-Germain, would you come with us? And like at 8, he has no concept that that's not going to happen probably in the next 2 years. But it's that blind faith that I might do that. And actually in life, as we get older, either experiences, the wrong people around us, life just weighs us down and we start to lose that self-belief. It starts to get buried. Sometimes it's because people have actually told us that we're not good enough. Sometimes it's apathy, which I often say is actually sometimes worse. Because at least if somebody's telling you you're not good enough, for some people that's a fire to be like, I'm going to prove you wrong. If somebody tells me I can't do something, I'm like, just watch me. I'm absolutely going to do it. But I think apathy sometimes, if people don't have people around that care about what they're doing or that have that encouragement and support to go, yes, you can, it just diminishes that ability to think, well, actually, maybe I can't, maybe I need to stay small. And for me, it's so sad that we've become as a society, we don't shout about our successes and our wins because it's boasting or it's being cocky. Well, it's not being proud of who you are and what you're able to do. And I think, surrounding yourself by the right people can have a huge shift in that, but some people don't know how to do that, or they're not even aware that actually that's what's happened to them. And so for me, being able to show them that and then give them the tools to change that, which is the most important thing, because this all started because I realised I didn't have the right people around me and I wasn't where I wanted to be and certainly wasn't who I wanted to be. And then I didn't know what to do about that. And actually that was the most terrifying bit of knowing something didn't feel right, but not knowing how to fix it and not having the tools. We don't teach children these. You go into any school and say, how do you stay fit? And they'll tell you to exercise, drink plenty of water, eat your fruit and veg. But if you ask someone how to protect your mental health, they have no idea. And that just breaks my heart. It really does.
It is heartbreaking as a new mum myself, seeing the
mental health stats for children and the hardship that children are going through in terms of bullying, in terms of undiagnosed mental health or neurodivergence challenges, where the impact on their mental health is so scary. And I think you're right with what you're saying there as well, as we as adults are walking around, sometimes we've got child-shaped problems, or we've got a screaming child, our inner child, that if you believe in that, who wants to be heard. And so we've got lots of broken people trying to interact with each other in families who want the best for each other, but sometimes it doesn't come out that way because we have needs that aren't being met for whatever reason. I'm really fascinated by what you were saying there about just kind of coming to an awakening for yourself of, whoa, this is not what I wanted my life to be. What is this? This is not who I am. When did you start to realize that things weren't quite what you were expecting?
It was more of being shook than an awakening. It was a very, very dramatic. I felt like the only way I can ever describe it is I felt like I was in a car traveling along and someone had slammed the brakes on and I had kept going, and I was kind of thrust into this like, okay, I wasn't wearing a safety harness. I am in trouble. So a tiny bit of backstory. This started when I was 5. So 5-year-old me, my mum left, which 40 plus years ago was unheard of. It's sadly a lot more common now, and we have blended families and separated families. But 40 plus years ago, that didn't happen. So right from back then, I was very different. Now, don't get me wrong, I had the most amazing childhood. I loved living with my dad and my grandparents. But unbeknown to adult me, as you touched on, that 5-year-old me made a ridiculous promise that my child would never come from a broken home. Now, that's the most awful term, but again, back then, that's the term that was used. Now, that wasn't a conscious choice as a 5-year-old to make that promise to myself. And like I say, for most of my life, I was unaware of it. But then, as I got older and various other things in life had happened, got to an age where I wanted to have my own family, and it was always something that I knew I wanted to be. I was not one of these girls that dreamed of getting married. I didn't put the tea towel over my head or my first Holy Communion veil and imagine I was a bride. But I absolutely knew in my heart I was destined to be a mum. I come from a very big family. There's hundreds of us, and got lots and lots of cousins. I'm the second oldest of lots of cousins, and so always had little ones around me. And then when I found out that I had fertility issues, it was heartbreaking because it had never ever crossed my mind that I might have an issue. And I guess that's where this 5-year-old me started to kind of play out some of these things. Now, I'm very lucky after years of IVF. I have the most gorgeous, gorgeous little one. He's my absolute life. But it was really, really hard. It was really, really difficult because as part of that IVF journey, my husband and I fell apart. He had his own things going on, which again, he didn't have the emotional language or the communication skills to be able to deal with. I was so focused on this, that's all my intention and all my energy gone into that. And so we just lost who we were. We'd been friends for a very long time before we were ever a couple, but we got lost in that relationship and we turned into 2 very different people. And actually, because I now know because of therapy and NLP, which I know you talk a lot about, discovered the promise that 5-year-old me had made and realised that's so unrealistic. But I spent far too long in that relationship trying to keep that promise to myself, that I wasn't going to break up the family, that, no matter what, I very much believe that, marriage is forever and it's through sickness and health and for better or worse. But actually that's not realistic because actually the all worse was making me really, really poorly. And it got to the point that I was so poorly, I was hallucinating.
Wow.
These were very physical symptoms. It wasn't just, I was feeling a bit anxious or I was feeling a bit depressed. I would have these absolute visions of terror and not be able to move. It was awful. I was like, this isn't healthy, this isn't right. And actually I'm not being the best mum to my little one because something awful is going to happen and I'm not going to be able to manage. So I had to seek help. And I'm very lucky that I could go back to my psychologist. I'd seen a psychologist as part of the IVF process. So I could go back and see them reasonably easily. Mental health is not an easy support to get, but I was very fortunate that I had access to that. And they helped me then unpack some of that. And that's when I then got into NLP for myself. I was like, I have to understand, I need to be able to reframe this. I need to be able to retrain that subconscious part of my brain. So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming, and it's about retraining those thought processes that are, not correct. We sort of file things in our brains, and I always imagine it's like a filing cabinet and it's been put in the wrong folder, and so you can't retrieve it because it's not where it should be, or the wrong information's being stored. And it's about reframing that and refiling things. And it was really, really hard. It was the most difficult thing I'd ever done. And to this day, still part of me can't believe quite that I did end up separating. But it rocked who I thought I was, because I come from a strong Catholic family. We don't separate at all. And I thought, if I can be so wrong about that and so wrong about him, what else am I not right about that I believe, is
the
core of who I am? And for a good 18 months, I was absolutely broken. And I felt like I was watching this person go through the motions of my life. But I was like, who is this? And it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. But I realised, actually, for my little boy's sake, as well as my young, still always putting somebody else first. But, in that time, that was what kept me going. I think if I hadn't had him, I wouldn't be here. And that's not being dramatic, but I honestly don't believe that I would have got through it. But it made me really look at, actually, right, what did I want? What did that 5-year-old girl want? And I'm going to simplify it here because I could talk about this for hours. But that 5-year-old girl wanted a mum and a dad and a child who all loved each other and who all supported each other and who were a family unit. Now, his dad and I don't live together. We haven't for 4 or 5 years. But I have the family unit. It just doesn't look like convention says it does it in one house.
Exactly.
We have 2 houses. We go to football matches together. We go on holiday with friends still together. My little boy has 2 parents who love each other in a slightly different way now, but who love each other. And I know for a lot of people looking in, they don't understand it. And my little boy's dad struggled with that at first. And I was like, it's not for them to understand. They're not living it. It's for us. And this works best for us. And I know one of the things that a lot of people got stuck on, and I know you've talked about this before with other guests, is that forgiveness. I had to forgive his behaviour and part of it, and I'll not go into what he did because that's his story, but there was things to forgive, but also forgive myself because I had acted in a way that didn't feel right, and I was part of that, and I had to take ownership of the bit that was mine. Not saying it was all me, but we're both in a situation. And for me, a lot of my very close friends, or people I thought were friends, were like, well, you're letting him off the hook, or you're dismissing what he's done. I'm like, I'm absolutely not. But this is what is best for me, ultimately. Me holding on to that pain and resentment just keeps it there. It doesn't free me to be able to move forward. And actually now, I've got everything I ever wanted. It just looks packaged slightly differently. And I think in life, we get too stuck on, this is the thing that I want, and we can't see another way to get it. And so hopefully in what I do is help people see you can still have what you wanted. It just can come in a different form.
I love that. What you're doing is you're reframing the way things could be. You're giving people hope and options. And I see so much courage in what you've been through. I can't imagine how scary it is having a young child and hallucinating or seeing things or feeling like things are just off and different. I mean, gosh, what a thing to go through. I think as well, there is something, I haven't personally been through IVF, but something about putting all those chemicals in your body, you have the focus of the outcome is the baby, but there's no preparation for what it's like to be a mum. So although I didn't experience IVF, I did experience the drugs used in an induction when my little one was born. And what I didn't realize until later was how powerful those drugs are. They are extremely strong, and they mirror like oxytocin, or they create this desire for your body to release the baby. But what I didn't know until I did some research later was Pitakin, which I think is the drug used in inductions. It actually, if you are someone who's experienced anxiety or has mental health challenges around anxiety, it can really spiral for you. So I remember when I had my little girl, I was like 3 days into being a mum, and I was up cleaning frantically because I was so scared I would throw it down the stairs, or the kind of intrusive thoughts that were there were quite incredible, and I hadn't had any support around this drug may result in this brain chemistry change, and that felt quite challenging. So I can't imagine, injecting yourself with hormones and going through the whole IVF process, and then also the outcome of like it's such a change. It's such a transition to become a mum. Could we talk about that for a minute? Because I think a lot of women lose themselves, actually. They giving so much care to this tiny little human who really needs them. At the same time, you've got a partner who needs attention too, who's also going through a big change, but they seem to be able to go and speak to their friends and still go for pints, and you're still at home and you're thinking, what is this life? This isn't what I signed up for. I think there's a lot of pressure on families in those first three years, actually. So I mean, what have you seen for yourself in that way?
Well, absolutely. So I spent nearly 5 years going through the IVF process. It wasn't simple. It certainly wasn't the first time. And you're right, they don't tell you the physical effect that has on your body, or the emotional effect that has on your body, or those around you. And it's me, I wouldn't sort of for the world, because I have the most gorgeous little boy, but I also wouldn't wish it on anybody. It's the most awful experience because of the downside that doesn't get talked about. And, one of my things that I'm really passionate about is that we need to understand it more, because actually when I started talking about it, it was amazing how many other people knew somebody, or it happened to a sister or a work colleague or a best friend. But it's such a taboo subject. So, take that out of it. I'd spent such a long time trying to get pregnant. When I finally did, it was that like, oh, actually, I'm going to have a baby now. I hadn't thought about that next step. And I felt I know I'm sure all new mums do, but I had felt so much extra pressure because I'd gone through such a journey to get them, and I had, spent a huge amount of money and all the emotional, like I say, side that goes with it. And it had consumed, and I use that word quite, on purpose, it had absolutely consumed my life. I then felt once I had him, I couldn't say that I couldn't manage, or I was finding it difficult, because I'd got what I always wanted. And I knew friends and other people that I'd met on my IVF journey that hadn't been as lucky and had had to go down the adoption route, or that had, run out of money and couldn't continue. And I was heartbroken for them. So I was like, how do I, as a new mum who has this absolutely precious gift, and all babies are precious, but that has this absolutely precious gift that is what I always wanted, how can I then say I can't manage? And so I felt a huge, huge pressure to get it right, because of my own story again, which I hadn't realised when he was little. There was this huge pressure on what being a mum was and what that meant. And yeah, it was so difficult to outwardly go, I've got everything I've ever wanted. And I generally was. I was the happiest person in the world to be a mum. And I loved him. He was prem. So he was tiny for absolutely ages. Thankfully, he wasn't particularly poorly when he was prem, but he was teeny tiny for ages. So I had him as a newborn for like 3-4 months. It was great, because everyone was like, oh, he's tiny and he's gorgeous. And I got all that new mum fuss that I had always craved, and I'd given to so many other people, including my own, brother who was younger than me, and cousins and things. And so I'd got this thing that I always wanted. And it was absolutely, I was elated. But it meant the lows of then, like, am I doing it right? What if I do this wrong? What if this doesn't work? What if? And my brain will absolutely, I'm great at spiralling. But I can't say that I need to ask for help. I can't say that I'm struggling, because that's ungrateful or that's selfish, because I've got this thing that I always wanted. And that took me a good while to get my head around, to go like, it's still okay to say it's tough. It's still okay to go, look, I have got everything I wanted. I wouldn't change it for the world. But it's hard. It doesn't come as a manual. No two are the same. So even if you've got a really good friend or somebody alongside you, it still doesn't necessarily do the same. So, he wouldn't sleep unless he was on me. So that whole, rest when the baby rests, nap when the baby naps, I can't, because I've got to walk around with him attached to me. So actually, while he was asleep, I'd be changing the beds or doing the laundry. But then when do you rest? But you've got to do what you need to do to survive, haven't you? And it's so difficult. There are no instructions. And actually what I have learned is there is no right or wrong. And you can do all the right things, in inverted commas, because, like I say, there's not a rule book to follow. But you can do your best with the tools that you have at that time, and protect them as much as you can. But actually, one, you can't be with them all the time. And two, stuff will happen outside of your control, and you've got to get used to that, And as they get older, those issues I remember my dad saying to me, who is my absolute rock, I remember saying to him saying to me, that when you have a baby, your sole job as a parent is to keep him alive. When they hit about 5, your sole job as a parent is stop them killing themselves, because they'll run into things, they'll trip up. My little boy did yesterday, threw my day off completely. Got a phone call from school. He's had a little bump in the yard. Got to school and he's almost split his head open. He's had the biggest egg on his head. And they're like, okay then. So, you know, life throws stuff at you and you've got to just do what you can and do the best that you can. So actually reading about the little things of, you know, should I make this choice or this choice? Most of them actually are inconsequential because stuff happens anyway. And it's just, for me now, my biggest job of being a mum is to make sure he's happy, to make sure he's as safe as I can make him. And by safe, I don't just mean of not crashing into people in playgrounds, but just that he understands how to communicate, he understands how to protect his emotions, that he understands that he can ask for what he needs for. He won't always get it, but he can have an opinion on that. And I think we don't give that enough to children. We don't let them have those choices. And we're not preparing them as they get older. And if I can give him those tools of emotional stability, of resilience, which I know is a word that's bandied about a lot, but what does that actually mean? Well, it's not sheltering them from real life, but also giving them the tools to cope with things when they happen. And that's, as a parent, that's the best that we can do.
Wow. I mean, it's amazing what you're saying there about giving him the tools you can so that he's equipped to cope with things. So it's that self-resilience. But also what you're saying there is no matter how much we try to control external factors, we really can't. So one thing that I am a big fan of with NLP is the rules of how brain and how they work. And one of the things is, and it's really helped me in my healing and forgiveness journey, but what you said there before, so you did the best you could with the resources and the choices you had at the time. And I love that because I've been really hurt by people in the past and experienced trauma as a child and all sorts of things. And when I first heard that phrase, I was like, well, that's just excusing people's behavior. But actually, our mind always has a positive intent of every activity we do. And so, you know, I can see how with what you've shared of your husband, you know, how for him and what you said, you know, the resources he had at the time, he was doing the best he could. So I actually really admire your way of co-parenting, having a blended family and having a sense of, well, this is my boundary. This is what I need. This is what I want for my child. It looks a bit different to everyone else, but actually that's okay. I think that is so powerful. Women do have more choice now than they maybe have had in the past. I'd like to talk about that for a moment because I always remember being told as a little girl, like, that I was such a sunshine girl. And it's a lovely thing to say, you know, you're little Miss Sunshine. But it was almost like I was programmed to always be happy and smiley. And so when you are sad, then what does that mean? And actually being told it's okay to feel these feelings. We get sad sometimes. I think more children, as we are struggling with a child mental health crisis and adult, I think being able to own your feelings and feel them, but also owning that for where you are right now, you're doing the best you can, you know?
Absolutely.
But I mean, I'm so moved by just this awakening that you had. And I say awakening because I am someone of faith and I have a very spiritual connection to things. But I guess for someone else, it might be a realization or, but you had this strong physical manifestation of stuff you were going through. So talk me through, you were able to access some help and to move forward. But what kind of tools and resources did you then begin to learn? Because you mentioned earlier that you realized you were surrounding yourself with people that didn't feel like they fit anymore. So was it that you had a value shift maybe and what you wanted for yourself didn't fit anymore, but then your life that you'd built didn't make sense anymore?
Absolutely. So I have always very much been a people pleaser. You know, my friends call me Monica because I am the hostess of the mostess. I am, and I love that. I love making sure everyone's all right, you know, for anywhere. And someone needs a drink, I'll go get you a drink. You know, if something needs done, you know, my friends, Sarah will ask, you know, if you're out somewhere, can we get next to a chair? And I love being the one that fixes things, that makes everybody else happy. You know, bringing other people joy is my joy. But actually that tipped into a point where it became my purpose. And actually when you become that much of a people pleaser and you can't then have your own happiness outside of that, it gives all of your power away. Because what it means is if I offer you something and that doesn't suit you, you're then controlling whether I'm happy or not, or whether I'm able to. I used to always say I wore lots and lots of different hats, metaphorically.
I love hats.
We do love hats, and I do wear them also in real life. But I used to wear lots of metaphorical hats. I was a great daughter. I was a great big sister. I was a great friend. I was the best boss. I was a great employee. And I played all these roles, Oscar-winning roles, because I was great at them, because I knew in that role as daughter, this is my job and that they were my duties. And as big sister, this is my job and they are my duties. And I was great at them. But I remember when I got to this point where I was absolutely broken, I remember the psychologist saying to me, right, so let's draw it out. I'm quite a visual person. So let's draw it out like the old school style pie chart. And this is how much time you're being daughter. And this is how much time you're being sister. And this is how much time you're being mom. And this is how much you're being friend. And I kind of ran out of pie before I got anywhere near me. And I was like, actually, and it was like someone slapped me. I was like, how am I fitting all of this in? And actually, where am I? And I remember, my dad had been poorly, and it was a paramedic that had said to me, like, how are you? And I couldn't answer the question. I was about 22, and I couldn't answer because I referred back to, well, Dad, this and this is happening. And he's like, no, how are you? And that for me was one of the biggest wake-up calls, and where I suppose start of change happened. But again, I put it back in a box because then my IVF journey started, and it was all about doing that. But what I realised is, by being such a people pleaser, it was at the detriment of like actually who I was. And so I had to rediscover, without all of those hats on, who is Sarah Jane? What do I like? Because if you liked fried eggs, then they were my favourite. But actually, if I was with somebody else and they liked scrambled, well, I love scrambled eggs, because I wanted to make you happy. And I wanted to make you feel like, oh yeah, that's the right answer, and make you feel comfortable. And it just got blown out of, like I say, total proportion, that I then didn't know what I like to do. So although the talking therapy with the psychologist was great, and it unlocked the sort of 5-year-old me, and I managed to, work on that, being able to change how I thought, I didn't have the tools at all. We came from a family where we didn't talk about our emotions an awful lot. I always knew I was loved. There was never any question of that, but we didn't talk about feelings. We didn't talk about what was happy and what was sad, or anything else in between. And so having to understand that, you can be really, really happy and really, really anxious at the same time. They don't happen separately. You can have both of those things. When I was a mum, or, being really annoyed with somebody but still loving them, can go side by side. And that's really confusing if you don't understand. And I always say that, there's not good emotions or bad emotions. All emotions are valid. Some are more positive and some are more negative. If you stay in that spiral of, anger, resentment, hurt, then yes, that becomes a negative emotion. But it's not a bad emotion, because it's our brain processing what's happened to us. And actually, to be angry at somebody or be resentful or be hurt is absolutely valid, if that's what you feel and that's what's happened to you. It's how you then move forward with that and not stay in that. So how do you take from that and move past it, either by letting go of that person, by addressing the issue and trying to come to a compromise, or by just setting a boundary? And again, I think we're not taught enough about boundaries, and that it's okay to say no. It's the smallest word, it's 2 letters, but it's one of the hardest words to say, because the guilt behind that can be so, so heavy that lots of us just are too scared to say it. And that was certainly where I was. So I started looking at different ways, and that's when I came across NLP. And so I studied a very basic online course to just have an understanding of, right, what's happening inside my head, because I don't understand. I felt like I had almost 2 people in my head, kind of having very different conversations. And I'm like, how do I make these balance? And as I got into it and started looking at that, I very much follow a 12-step program, which I absolutely love. I think everyone should do a 12-step program. So I was part of, I still am, but very heavily part of a 12-step program called Al-Anon. So it's for friends and families of people who are alcoholic, whether they say they are or not. As a family member, you can still go and get support, because it affects everybody. And from that, my version of, what was normal had become so distorted that I'd had to work those 12 steps on my life. And today my step 1 is I empower us for people, places and things, because stuff will still happen outside of my control. Thankfully it's not active alcoholism today, but it's other people still press my buttons, and I'm going to still work that. So some of what I now teach and live is part of a 12-step program. Some of it is absolutely based on gratitude. That was a huge, huge shift for me. And then lots of it is obviously the NLP methods, and reframing is a huge one. So two of the things, I'll come back to gratitude because for me that was literally was a life changer. But it's something that gets dismissed, which I also did very, very easily. But the other game changer for me was not being scared to fail at something, because I was such a perfectionist. And I often say now, Mary Poppins was even she wasn't even practically perfect, because actually there's no such thing as perfection. It's about progress. Tomorrow I'll be a different person than I am today because I've learned something, and that's okay, because it's about being the best that you are on that given day. And I know you referred to before about, using it as an excuse. Well, I did the best that I could with the given tools. If it genuinely was your best, then it's not an excuse. If you do it and keep doing it and making the same mistake, then yes, it's an excuse, because you haven't learned. You haven't pushed yourself out of that. But if genuinely that's where you're at, then you made the best choice, or what you thought at the time was the best choice, and then you shouldn't regret that. And we are so terrified to fail. And I now reframe fail. It's one of the things I teach in all my workshops. Whenever I'm speaking, I always make sure I mention it. And to reframe the word fail as first attempt in learning. And I just think for me, that was like, wow. Because actually as a child, most of us learn to walk. And you kind of, the little ones will shuffle along. Your little one will be doing it soon. And then he dies in the back of your head. But, we can come on, you're nearly there. They'll kind of wobble and they'll stand up and then they'll fall over. We don't go, oh, well, you tried, let's not bother again. You're like, yes, come on, you nearly did it. And you encourage them and they'll trip over and they'll fall over. Or riding a bike, they wobble, they need stabilizers, and they'll keep practicing. They keep failing at riding a bike until they learn. But we don't discourage that, we encourage it. How as an adult, when you're trying something new or you're doing something you're a bit unsure of, is failure a bad thing? Because actually it means you're trying something new, you're stepping outside that comfort zone, you're trying to expand your knowledge or your ability to do something. Then it's not a failure as long as you're learning from that. So that was one of the first sort of breakthroughs that I had of like, actually it's okay to get something wrong. That it's we all do it, we're human. And actually shying away from that and protecting ourselves from that and protecting our children from that is not healthy and it isn't good. So that was a huge, huge shift to go, I can do things and see if it works and give it a go, and then go, right, plan A didn't work. What's plan B? Let's see what went well. Let's see what didn't go well. And let's move forward and try something else. But the other huge, huge shift for me was, like I say, gratitude. And I have done this now every day for the last 9 years. And I remember when somebody first said to me, try doing a gratitude journal. And I was like, really, really low. I wasn't in a great place. I couldn't see a way out. I just felt so dark. And I remember thinking, how on earth is, I'm thankful for the trees and I'm thankful for the birds. Like, how is that going to change my life? How is that going to give me anything like concrete? I'm very much a logical person. I need to have a plan. I need to see what the steps are. I need to know what is next and what is happening. And that made no sense. But thankfully, I was so desperate. I was also prepared to try anything at that time. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it. Because I'm also a bit of a sort of competitive in that if someone says, do this, I'm like, right, fine. I'm going to do it. I'm going to show you it doesn't work. Well, that was my thought process. But it's magic and it does. And I started off and it felt so forced to write things down that I was thankful for. Because again, we're not taught to practice that. We're not taught as children. Although my little boy does do it because I do it. But generally, we're not taught to do that. And so I'd write, things that felt really, really forced, or I was having to search for things. And I always say to people now, they don't have to be big things. I'm thankful to get a cup of tea while it's still hot, because as I'm sure you know, with a small child, it doesn't happen very often. So if I managed to get one while it's still warm and I haven't microwaved it 3 times, then I'm grateful. I'm grateful to get to the bottom of the laundry basket, because again, it doesn't happen very often. So when it does, it's a miracle. I'm thankful there's a car parking space when I got here today, and I didn't have to then drive to the next car park and walk further to get here. It's the little things that actually we miss and we take for granted. Now, I'm not saying being thankful for those things are going to stop the awful things from happening, but it's about balance. So when we're faced with, a challenge, or whether it's somebody else's behaviour, whether it's a situation we find ourselves in, whether it's just thoughts that are or feel like they're kind of oppressing us, what happens is that's all we can see. So our brains are super, super clever, but also super, super stupid in that it'll just do what we tell it to do. So if we're thinking, oh, this awful thing has happened, or I'm dreading this, the brain goes, oh, right, that's what we're focused on. Let's find more things that will prove that point, that will prove that we're not good enough, that will prove that we're, people think X, Y, or Z of us. And our brain will find more things to prove that point, because that's what it thinks that we're doing. So if we stop for a second and say, look, yes, this awful thing has happened and I'm hurt, I'm upset, I'm resentful, but actually also I've got a friend that I could call. So being thankful is about redressing that balance. So yes, the negative thing, the thing that's upsetting you or hurting you is still there. But once you start to focus on those little things that before you would have just not paid attention to, it redresses that balance. And it's about kind of not having that spiral. And what will start to happen at first when you do a gratitude journal, and I always say do it just before you go to bed. Jay Shetty once said, and I remember hearing him speak, and he said setting your mindset is like setting your alarm clock. It's no good doing it when you get up in the morning. It's no good. You need to do it before you go to bed. You need to get yourself in that mindset, because actually when you're asleep, your brain processes the day that you've had. It will put things into that filing cabinet. And so, yes, you might have had the most awful day, but if you then spend literally 5 minutes saying, but these good things still did happen, or I'm thankful for these things, whether that was the person that came and helped you change your tyre because you blew a tyre and you were late to wherever you needed to be, find the positive within that. And there always is in any day. And it doesn't have to be huge. Like I say, there can be little things. What it starts to do is tell your brain, ooh, we're looking for things to be thankful for. And then you'll see things that were there all the time. You just missed them. And it's such a great reframe.
It is. It's a great reframe. It's super powerful. I've heard of people talking about look for the glimmers. Yeah. You know, look for the tiny bits of sparkles of light in your day. I remember reading about a lady who'd been through a miscarriage and it was really painful for her. And one of the things, she was trying to practice her gratitude diary, and she was like, I'm grateful that I was able to get out of bed today and I got to see the rainbow when it rained. Oh, it was something like that. And it really moved me, because I thought, well, she's going through such grief at this time, such loss, but there was still something. For me, I've found there have been times where I've really gone through a lot of self-learning of myself in recent years. And it's been hard. It's been hard to be in a relationship. And there's been a lot of times where I've thought, well, who am I and how do I want to show up in the world? And in my own gratitude journal, I will have said, I'm so grateful for the lessons of today, or I'm so grateful that this conflict that's come up is helping me learn how to use my voice. So one of the things alongside the gratitude model that I think is super powerful for anyone is actually to write down 28 people you want to forgive. And with those people, you think 28 people sounds like a lot, but I remember doing this for the first time, and my book was like 10 pages. I couldn't stop writing. I just had so many people that I wanted to forgive. And with every one of those, I said, thank you. Thank you for the lesson. Thank you for teaching me the power of whatever it was. I release you, and I release you in love, and I wish you the best. Because actually when we hold on to stuff, we're hurting ourselves. And as you said earlier, we're giving our power away. So for people who aren't into spirituality or that kind of context, what would you say, how would you explain the concept of giving your power away?
That's a good question. So I guess it's about giving other people permission to control your emotions. Because by relying on them, whether it's for validation, whether it's for approval, whether it's just for acknowledgement, if you measure yourself against what they feel about you, then you're letting them have that power of, you know, how you feel about yourself. And I did that for a very, very long time, and realised that the people that I had, not all of them, but a lot of the people that I had around me were taking and not giving. And I think any relationship is about what you both bring to that relationship, and that you're both better because of it. Now that will ebb and flow, and people say it should be equal 50-50. That's ridiculous. That's never going to happen. You know, sometimes I will only have 20 to bring and you will need to bring the other 80. But there'll be other times where actually you need 40 and I've got the 60 and I'm going to pile it on. Sometimes we might only both have 20 and the best we can manage is 40. And that's all right on that day, because that's all we've got to give. It isn't about that. But there'll be times where in any relationship, and whether that's a family member, you know, a partner, a child, you have to bring out a better version of each other. And the second that isn't what is happening, or the second there's an imbalance of how much you are getting as opposed to how much you are giving, then you need to relook at that relationship. And like I say, it won't always be even. There will be times in friendships. I've got a friend at the moment who, I'm really having to support because she's having a difficult time. I would expect nothing back from her because she hasn't got it to give. There's nothing in her tank to give. But I know in the past she's given it, and I know in the future she'll give it again. It's not about give and take in that kind of respect, like for like, but it's about knowing that if you haven't spoken to somebody for a while, but you need them, you can ring them and they'll be there if you need them to be, if they can. And it's about kind of, I can't remember who the quote's by, but we are made up of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And when I wrote my 5 down, I was horrified, absolutely horrified when I first started this journey of the new version of me that I am today, and will keep it becoming, because I was like, actually, they're not the 5 people that I want to be. They're really not. And whether that's because you are influenced by them, whether that's because they are keeping you small and not allowing you to shine your light, whether that is because you just don't have the right opportunities around you because of who you've surrounded yourself, and they're almost becoming a barrier rather than an amplifier outwards. You have to really look at it, and it's hard to do, especially if it's family members or people who you thought were close friends. But actually, when the chips are down, you want to know you've got people around you that have got your back regardless. And if that isn't the case, you need to look at that.
But also, I think it's that personal evolution we go through. You want to be always growing and learning. Yeah. Absolutely. Wow. I mean, there's so much I could talk to you about all day. Something that did pop in my head was the drama triangle. So this is something I've only recently been learning about. I'm someone who's always thought of myself as a nice person. I often get that feedback. You're so soft, you're so nice. And actually, I did my master's in business admin, my MBA, so that I would develop assertiveness skills in the boardroom, because I was always wanting to be nice and I didn't know how to communicate in a way that wasn't nice. Yeah. And so I've really come on a journey with that in terms of assertiveness. But when I learned about the drama triangle, it's this idea that you can be a victim, or you could be a rescuer, or you could be a perpetrator. And all of us can be any of those 3. We could be any of those 3 in one day, depending on the situation. But I think actively having the knowledge that we can create our own drama in our lives has been powerful for me. I think there was a time for me where I have been through hard stuff, like many people, and there's been trauma and there's been different things, but actually being able to say, right, well, okay, so you've been through that, and that's not taking away from it, but who are you today? One of my close friends and colleagues, Anne English, talks about our suitcases, our storytelling suitcases. What labels are we sticking on our suitcases? So in the past, people would stick their sticker from going to Spain or wherever they've been, and the suitcase would be covered in stickers. And sometimes we do that with our own trauma, with our own stuff. I can't let go of this anxiety because it's my anxiety, it's mine, and it's important to me. But actually, sometimes those labels don't fit anymore. And sometimes friendships don't fit. Sometimes places we've been or activities. I've seen this with alcohol. My relationship with alcohol has changed. And it's like, I don't need that anymore, because I'm okay with me, that I don't need to drink to mask how I feel or to give me a fake sense of confidence. So I think for me, being more of an active participant and player in my own story has been powerful. Have you come across the drama triangle?
Absolutely. And I was very much the rescuer. That was my job role. I felt that was my purpose. For a long time, I had to look after my dad. He was not well for a very long time. And I absolutely took on that role quite happily, because it gave me a job to do. I was looking after him. I was fixing him. I was making him better. I was doing none of those things. But in my head, that's what I told myself. I am literally the rescuer. I once drove up to Scotland to physically rescue somebody. That wasn't my job. I didn't need to do it. But again, that was me being a good person in inverted commas, because it gave me a purpose, and it externally validated, oh, isn't she great, she did this. Now, that wasn't out of vanity at all. It was not out of vanity. It was out about, I didn't know who I was, and being that role gave me a purpose. That's who Sarah Jane is. Now, it's not. It's part of who I am, and I will always help somebody if I can, for sure. But it doesn't define who I am. But it had become a learned, I suppose, character trait, really. But again, as with lots of things, it overtook the balance of what then was an all right amount of that to do and be part of, that it defined who I was. And I think none of us like change as humans, as creatures. Even when we know something isn't good for us, the thought of changing something is terrifying, because we don't know what's outside that. But unless we're prepared to make those changes, then actually we're just going to get stuck and life is going to happen to us, like you said. We're not going to be in charge of that. Once I realised that that's what I was doing, that that's the role I was playing, I did take some of my power back to go, actually, I don't have to do this. And other than a couple of friends who clearly weren't friends, actually, once I stopped being that person, nobody was horrified. Everybody respected those boundaries. I'd put that on me that, they'll not like me if. And I think we do that a lot of the time. We project our version of our story onto other people. Now, some of those people absolutely amplified that story and made me that role in that situation. And once I said no, and they weren't getting what they wanted, but actually that's fine because I didn't want them to be in my life. That wasn't a relationship that I wanted to have. But it is hard to do that. It's really, really hard to step out and make those changes. And I think without the right support, for me, it's virtually impossible to do, because you will go back to that comfort zone when the chips are down. However you practice, for me, I call it positive focus, which is a bit of all the things that I do. But however you practice this change that people are going through, it's like going to the gym. It's, you can go to the gym and train to run a marathon. You've got to start with maybe a mile, 5 mile, and you'll run up to a 5K. If I then didn't run for 3 years, I probably couldn't go back out and run a 5K. I'd have to start back at the mile. And our mental fitness is the same. Our well-being, our self-care is the same. You have to practice it to keep it up. The second you stop, and, I very much am aware of that. If I haven't probably this year practiced my self-care as much as I should have done, because I lost my mum, and, understandably, everything went out the window. But I can feel it now, 6 months on, I can feel that. And actually some of those old traits have crept back in again, because what has happened to us very much defines who we are and who we've become, but we don't have to take that forward. And that's the bit that people miss. Like you said, people hold on to, well, that was my experience, that was my story. Yeah, and it happened to you. And it's created who you are today, but it doesn't need to be taken into who you are tomorrow. You've learned that lesson from it. Mm-hmm. You can take the bits that have helped you and made you a better person, and the bits that were hurtful or destructive, you can leave behind. And it's that next step that I think people miss. They want to hold on to that because it's part of their identity. I work with a lot of people in recovery, and I love doing that, because for them, that lifestyle of who they were very much in their mind defines who they are. And lots of people around them still hold on to that. And I'm like, it doesn't define who you have to be going forward. Learning to let go of those parts of you. Yes, they got you there. Maybe there were coping mechanisms. Maybe there were parts of your character that you had to do. I know I had lots of, really dysfunctional coping mechanisms as a teenager and into my 20s. And at the time, they served me well because they got me through it. But they don't serve me today. I don't need to hold on to them. They're a tool I use. Naturally, I now need a different tool. And it's okay to swap your tool over, or it's okay to change, like you say, whether it's friendships, whether it's your surroundings, whether it's something you believe in. It's okay to make those changes. If the thing is no longer serving you, we don't need to hold on to all that baggage, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, I'm so inspired by your journey, just how you've pulled yourself out through some really hard times. And as you said, your son's incredible, but actually there are times you're not sure if you would be here if he wasn't there to give you that focus and strength and clarity. So I really resonate with that. I think it takes huge courage to redefine your life, and to actually look at yourself and go, I don't like what I see, because sitting with ourselves is one of the hardest things that anyone can do. So I'm really also moved by what you said about the pie chart earlier, where you sort of mapped out. I mean, I love a coaching wheel, a wheel of life. It's such a powerful tool. Yeah. I'll put a link for anyone who wants to do one in this show notes, but to actually look at your life and go, right, where are my priorities? And I don't think you can always do everything all at once. Sometimes you have to focus your areas. You might focus on health at one point, or you might focus on your business at one point. But I do feel that actually taking the time to zoom out is really important.
Absolutely. So one of the things I do every year, I do a reset in January with people, and we look at that. We look at, where you feel in the different areas of life. Now, when, I'm going to be controversial here, we're never going to be a 10 on everything. It's not going to happen, people. Like, you might feel a 10 about your relationship, but a 4 about how you feel in your health, or you might feel an 8 about your health, but a 2 about your friendships. It's going to ebb and flow, and that will change over time. So you might look at those sort of areas, and I always say sort of family, friends, work, your health, both physical and mental, and then you, and that 5th one always gets missed off. Just how do you feel about yourself? A great quote shared on the Drew Barrymore show of all places, but it was fabulous, that if you were given another human and to be responsible for that human, so in your instance you just have been given a baby, but all of us, if we were given another person to be responsible for, how would we treat them? How would we talk to them? What love would we give them? And actually, we have been given a human to look after when we're born, ourselves. And that blew my mind, because actually, if we take ourselves out of ourselves and we're responsible for this person, are we talking to ourselves kindly? Not all of the time. Are we doing the best that we can do for ourselves? Not all of the time. And actually, if you take that step out of yourself and think, right, I'm okay in this area, but this area needs some work. And it's a blend, there will never be a balance. There won't be. We talk about a work-life balance. It doesn't happen. It's a blend in all of those areas, and they will ebb and flow as you focus on them. And I think it's so important to just accept that. That's how it's got to be. That's how life is. And as you focus on the different areas, you'll get a little bit stronger on one, and you'll move on to the next one. I always say it's a little bit like decorating your house. You'll start off in the lounge, you'll re-wallpaper, and that's done for a while. And then you think, I've come out the lounge, the hall looks a bit like it needs a tidy up. And so you'll repaint that. And then you go upstairs. And by the time you got around the house, the lounge needs done again. And it is a continual process. But that's the fun of life. Like, it's just being aware of those different stages that you're at and making sure you're doing the best for them. And I think what we tend to do is focus more on the bits that are good, and we try and hide away from the bits that aren't, because it's difficult to face those things.
Exactly.
And that's where we're at.
And some people never take that look at themselves, or it is so painful, and it is so much easier to drink or gamble or spend or whatever we need to do. So I really feel so much inspiration from our chat there. I'd love to talk about the arrow. Can you tell us a bit about that?
I can. So just as you were saying there about having a moment, having the strength or the courage to make that change, because for most of us, we don't know how to unlock that. I certainly didn't. So I came across this quite a few years ago, randomly at a business event. The person that was doing it as a bit of a sort of party piece, because he's a firewalk instructor. But I was intrigued by it. I was like, I'm going to look into this more. And I knew at the time it wasn't the right thing for me, but I'd looked into the purpose of it. So for anybody that doesn't know, those of you who can see me, it's an archery arrow that we have here. Those of you that are listening, it is like a bow and arrow that you use. And the purpose of it is very much that mind over matter. So when I got to that kind of crossroads of, I'm not well, very much was something needs to change, or I'm not going to be here. I had tried everything, and actually through lots of work, through my NLP, through talking, lots of talking therapies, I realised that I had to make a change. Something had to change, but I didn't have the strength, or I didn't feel like I had the strength to voice what that change needed to be. It took me 18 months to say the words to make that change in my life. And it was the hardest thing, but the best thing I've ever done. But at the time, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get the strength to do this. And then I remembered about the arrow. So the principle of an arrow, and this has been done for thousands and thousands of years. The principle of the arrow is you put it on the soft part of your neck, and the other end goes on the board. So I stand, or whoever's doing it stands with a board at the other end, but you can do it against a tree, you can do it against, a wall, and you step into the arrow and the arrow breaks. Now, I use it because it's such a personal connection between me and whoever I'm working with. And what they do is they'll write on a limiting belief on there, so something self-doubt, something that they know is holding them back and is no longer serving them. Or, as I did in the case of my first arrow, is I wrote that I needed strength. I didn't feel like I had it, and that's what I needed to try and summon. I needed to try and be able to unlock that. So I wrote strength on my arrow. And then as I stepped forward, the arrow smashed. And that was unlocking all of those things that were stopping me from getting my strength that I needed. And I had it within me. And the next day I had that conversation that I'd been putting off for 18 months. And for me, the reason I love it is sort of, one, because I experienced it and I know. I don't say this lightly, but it was life-changing. It really, really was. It absolutely shifted the trajectory, no pun intended, of my life. But actually, when I do it with other people, the emotion that I see people let go of. You know, I've had people say that it's freeing, that it's liberating. It just unlocks something inside of you when you do it, because your whole being is saying, don't do that. Don't step forwards. And yet you tell yourself, it's okay, I'm with someone that I trust, I know I'm all right. And that little sort of voice that's trying to keep you safe, but it's in overdrive, that is stopping you from doing whatever it is that you need to do. You know, that kind of fight or flight response that years ago, we were worried a tiger was going to come and eat us. And now it might be that, I can't stand up in a meeting. Well, you're not going to get eaten by a tiger in a meeting unless you've got really weird meetings at work. But that has gone into overdrive of that panic and that anxiety of what I can't do has become disproportionate to actually what it is that we're doing, because we're not used to pushing ourselves outside that comfort zone. So with this, it's about telling yourself that you can do the thing that you think you can't do, that you have got that strength, because we've all got it inside of us, all of us. It's just about being able to unlock it. And so what I get people to do is hold it between the palms of their hand and press. And you guys can see here, and if you're watching, it doesn't really bow, it doesn't move. And actually all that happens is you end up with a little red mark on your hand. And that is a metaphor that in life, sometimes if you keep coming at something the same way, nothing's going to change. You're just going to end up hurting yourself or somebody else or being in pain. But actually, if you shift perspective, when you do that and come at it from a different direction, when you actually break the arrow, it breaks really, really easy without very, very little pressure. You just take a step and it breaks. Anyone that does it will tell you it breaks and you can't really feel it on your neck. And that metaphor of actually, if you come at something from a different direction, like I did with my family unit that I now have, it's so much easier and you get what you wanted. You just have to be prepared to make that change to do it. And so for me, it's a really, really great way to lock in that learning, to lock in that memory. And of course, the people then take the arrow with them with the broken word on. And anytime they have a little bit of self-doubt, what they then can do is look at that broken arrow and go, I did that. So actually I can face this, whatever it is that they're facing. And for me, once I'd done that one, like I said, it did change my life completely, because I had that literally within 24 hours, I had that conversation. I've had people that, have suffered with massive anxiety that have not had a single panic attack since they did this. I had one lady who had been abused by her partner and strangled. She couldn't wear necklaces, she couldn't wear high tops. Didn't think she was going to be able to do it. I said, it's not a problem, I understand, we can break it over your leg. No one's ever going to be made to break the arrow. And yet she came up and she did it and she smashed it on her neck. And she messaged me a few weeks later with the scarf on. She's like, I'm so excited. But for me, that was life-changing for her. And the fact that I get to give that as a gift to other people. And people sort of say to me, well, why do you do this? And I feel like I'm compelled to. Once I'd done mine and saw the power that had, I couldn't not share this with everybody else. Like I feel like I would be preventing other people from having this amazing gift. And why do I get to keep that to myself? So I love that I get to do it and call it work. Like, how ridiculous is that? That you're giving people the permission. And people often say to me, oh, thank you for doing that. I didn't do anything. I stand still with the board. Yes, I support you. Yes, I give you the tools. Yes, I give you permission sometimes. But, they take the step, they do the work. And actually for some people, that in itself is just so empowering. Go like, well, actually I can do something. And yeah, it's just an absolute joy to see those transformations and those changes.
Beautiful. I'm so excited, and hopefully we can get some footage of us doing it that we can put online for anyone to watch. So thank you for sharing that with us. I have one last question I have to ask you. So what is your number one word to nurture your zest?
Definitely gratitude. It comes back to anything. Whenever I'm faced with any kind of challenge, that's what I come back to is the gratitude. That wherever situation I am in, pick out the gratitude around it. And it's seen me through some really difficult choices. It's seen me through some really difficult times. And it always just makes, I will end with, Billy Connolly always says, there's not bad weather, just the wrong clothes. And I think if we take life like that, if we don't have bad days, stuff happens that makes us feel a certain way. But we've all got the tools to be able to deal with if we just practice a bit of gratitude.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to Nurture Your Zest today. If you're feeling extra kind, it would mean so much to me if you could share this episode with your friends or family or anyone who you think might feel inspired by this content. Liking, sharing, or interacting with our content is a great way to support us as content creators, and it helps us to bring interesting stories and more people to you. This podcast is a Flamingo Heights podcast studio production, and I've been your host, Ashley King. If you liked today's episode, follow the video on your screen now, or check out the link in your show notes to find similar content.